When it comes to visual communication, color is one of the most important visual elements to consider. If you're new to graphic design, there will be lots to learn about color theory, how to choose colors, and how they work well together. But there is also a lot to be learned about how color can be used to establish visual hierarchy in your design. In graphic design, there are principles of design that can be considered, which we can keep in mind in order to develop and create successful design. These principles all have a relationship between each other and appear in every well-designed piece of work you see. Understanding and harnessing design principles will enable you to create good visual communication and design in a variety of ways to make specific, appropriate, and meaningful impressions. This is what typically separates good design from bad design. In a previous video, I discussed one of the key design principles, hierarchy. In that video, we looked at the key ways hierarchy can be achieved in poster design. In poster design, hierarchy can be achieved in a variety of ways using contrast in layers, contrast in scale, contrast in color, contrast in space, and contrast in direction. Now, it's important to remember that these techniques don't have to be used exclusively, as some can be used together to develop a clear hierarchy in your design. In this video, we are going to look at one of the key ways to achieve hierarchy in poster design. I'm going to take you through a quick presentation where we can look at some examples of how hierarchy can be achieved using contrast in color in poster design, and the lessons we can learn to incorporate into our own design. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's take a look at how contrast in color can help develop visual hierarchy. Now, a quick recap. Visual hierarchy is created by contrast between visual elements in a composition. Contrast helps distinguish elements from each other, which helps with legibility. Typically, visual elements with the highest contrast are noticed first, and so on. And one of the key ways to achieve contrast in a poster design is with contrast in color. Now, just like contrast in scale can be used to easily attract and determine what the eye sees first, contrast in color can also be used to great effect, but also to create depth and volume in a composition to push elements back, bring elements forward, or create high or low volume. Typically, whatever visual element is the most clear and legible and the most bright or dark in contrast with the surrounding visual elements in a composition is what the eye will be drawn to first. Using color can be a more sophisticated and dynamic way to establish hierarchy in your design. Depending on your approach, if only using two colors, contrast can be achieved simply in an obvious and clear way, though if using multiple colors can be achieved in a more smooth and subtle way. In some posters, contrast of color is used to establish legibility and create impact, which can be used well to establish and suggest hierarchy. Here are some poster examples where we can see how contrast of color has been used to establish hierarchy in a variety of ways. Some are simple designs that only use a few colors to create high clarity and impact. Now, this is the most straightforward way to present visual information in the most clear way possible. Only using 2 or 3 contrasting colors makes a composition more legible and easier to comprehend. This approach can be taken when you want to achieve maximum clarity, impact, and practicality in your design. However, care must be taken to ensure the right colors are chosen for the intended outcome and contrast well enough to be clearly read. In these examples, we see there is adequate contrast in color to enable clear legibility. Here we can see how this has been done with great effect. The difficulty level for this technique is easy. Now, some posters take another approach and use contrast of color to create order and structure to compartmentalize information. This is not only a practical approach that can be taken if dealing with content-rich compositions to help compartmentalize information, but also an approach to add a bit of flair to your design. This can help make sense of an otherwise complex and busy design. Skill is required for color theory and to get the right balance to make sure that all elements are structured well. The difficulty level for this technique is challenging. Now, some designs can be more complex, which use multiple colors to highlight and distinguish visual elements. Now, this is where things can get a bit more tricky and complex, which requires a good eye for color. Generally, this approach is applied to achieve more dynamic and vibrant designs, which can create more depth and flair. Further skill will be required for colour theory and to get the right balance when working with multiple colours. If managed well, with adequate contrast between the elements, this can create more visually sophisticated and appealing results. Overall, in each example, contrast is used well to distinguish each visual element to maximise legibility. The difficulty level for this technique is hard. Now, in a previous video, we learned how normally it's the largest visual element that attracts the eye first. However, this is not always the case. In some instances, type, shape, or even image may be the largest visual element in a composition, though if its contrast is substantially lower compared to surrounding elements, then it will appear less prominent, pushed back, further away, and attract the eye less. Here are some poster examples where hierarchy has been clearly defined by contrast. Here we see how contrast has been reduced on some of the larger visual elements to make some of the smaller elements more prominent. This is where conventional rules can be turned on their head. If harnessed in a strategic way and applied cleverly, contrast of colour can give prominence to certain elements regardless of scale to enhance a message and control visual hierarchy in a design. Skill and creativity will be required to use strategy and harness the visual elements well to achieve the intended outcome. Using this approach can achieve more unusual and less predictable results. Here we can see how this has been done with great effect. The difficulty level for this technique is hard. So, in conclusion, one of the most straightforward techniques to achieve a clear sense of visual hierarchy is to use contrast of colour. Using colour may seem simple, but depending on how many colours you use and the choice of colour and level of contrast between them will determine how challenging it will be to achieve the right balance and level of legibility. Skill and care will be required when managing multiple colours and complexity in your design. So what can we learn? Well, without taking care to establish a clear visual hierarchy, a design will be confusing and difficult to comprehend. High contrast in colour can be used to clearly separate and distinguish visual elements with very practical results. However, if harnessed in a strategic way and applied cleverly, contrast in colour can produce more sophisticated results. If managed carefully, one can create dynamic, exciting poster designs with impact and depth. So in application, when you're designing posters or anything for that matter, be sure to consider contrast between your colours to establish a clear hierarchy. Also, when you look and observe other designs, ask yourself, how has hierarchy been considered? Is there a clear sense of hierarchy? How have they used contrast of colour in their design to achieve it? And how well does it work as part of the design? Well, I hope you enjoyed this design theory lesson. If you did, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified of more design lesson videos like this in future. Now, this lesson is part of a bigger series on poster design and part of my poster design ebook. If you want to take a closer look at the examples I demonstrated in this video and learn more about poster design with tutorials on how to make poster design and undertake poster design challenges, you can invest in the poster design ebook. Link is in the description. Now, this video was created for all my members of the GDS Design School community. If you'd like to join the GDS Design School community, where we chat about design, give each other feedback, and where I set design challenges, you are all welcome to join for free. Again, link is in the description, and I look forward to seeing you there. So until my next design lesson, unleash your creativity, and I'll see you next time.